Welcome.
Airports. Thanks again.
Can you zoom in on this? Do you know how to do this?
You guys ready for a treat? Really good. Laughing at all his jokes. He's really funny too.
Wait, but you have to like slide it over. Here. No, this.
So, thanks for coming tonight. I'm Phil Mayer, one of the Associate Deans School of Education and Social Sciences. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Mr. DeWeese. A little bit about Mr. DeWeese. Born in Pittsburgh, Phil DeWeese graduated from Winsburg High School and then from Wake Forest University with a bachelor's degree in history. He served as first lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps from 1972 to 1975, and then was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives as a Democrat in a special election when he was only 26 years old. He went on to be reelected to 18 consecutive terms as a representative from Fayette, Greene, and Washington counties, and to serve in the leadership of the Pennsylvania House. He served as Majority Whip and Majority Leader before rising to become the 135th Speaker of the House during the 1993-1994 session. After 5 years of investigation by Republican State Attorney General Tom Corbett, DeWeese was not charged in connection to the scandal known as Bonus Gate. He was, however, indicted in December 2009 on 6 charges of conflict of interest, theft, and criminal conspiracy on accusations that 2 members of his staff used state resources to campaign for political office. The trial began January 23, 2010. He was reelected in 2010 anyway, but was ultimately convicted of 5 of the 6 felony charges, sentenced to 30 to 60 months in state prison, and incarcerated from May 2012 to March 2014. DeWeese currently works as a lobbyist for Clear Coalition, representing organized labor, and gives talks around the state about criminal justice reform. We're pleased to have him with us tonight. Please join me in giving a warm welcome.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you, members of the student body from Robert Morris, for joining me here tonight for this class. I am going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more and give added texture to the introduction that I think somebody else wrote for me. And thank you, Jeffrey. And then I'm going to talk about 5 points, things that I learned, things that I perceived, and things that helped me grow. And I hope that at the conclusion of the class, you'll have some idea of a journey of one character, and as your president said as he exited the classroom, laugh at my jokes, he's a funny guy. The last time I was with the president, I sang a rap song to him that I had developed in the penitentiary, and it was full-freighted with coarse language, and we both had a middle evening in Harrisburg, and there was great laughter. But tonight's not the night for that, although I don't think you would believe, because I did sing the rap song at other universities, but I've toned it down, and I was well received. And in that very, very melancholy setting behind 7 rows of razor wire, one of the appellations that they conferred upon me, they being my younger colleagues, because if you're with 1,200 people in a big state penitentiary, one of the names that I got was a cracker rapper. So, notwithstanding the dubiety of that term, I just wanted to give you a quick exposure to my world. Obviously, that's been a long, long time ago. I had an affinity for bow ties when I was 3 years old. I still maintain that affinity. I like to do things that are somewhat more strenuous, so this was a little bit more difficult. No offense to the United States Army. I thought that the Marine boot experience would shape me up, so I reached a little bit and went to the Marines. I had a very poor academic record. I hope that's not the case with you, or especially you, since you're smiling, because when I was at Wake Forest, I did a lot of smiling and not enough studying. I was almost like George Armstrong Custer at West Point. He graduated last in his class. I was about 25th from the bottom. Joined the Marine Corps on graduation day and got to be a second lieutenant. That woman there who just died several months ago at the age of 97, both of them World War II active duty veterans. She penned my gold bars on, and my little experiment in the Marine Corps was off and running. But I had a marvelous life. Both of those folks were just high school graduates. Dad worked in a mill, and she did hair. And then he got a job selling automobiles. I played second base at Waynesburg High, and I was offered a chance to go down to Wake Forest and play baseball. After the second year, the coach told me I was not an essential part of his plans, and my career was jettisoned. I wanted to be the next Bill Mazeroski. I couldn't even make the second string or the third string at old alma mater. But nevertheless, it was 4 idyllic years. The great American writer Scott Fitzgerald wrote an autobiographical sketch just after World War I, and it was called This Side of Paradise. Well, I was living this side of paradise at Wake Forest. And then all of a sudden, I was in the United States Marines. If you can pick me out, there's only one way, really. That's because my t-shirt was up higher than anybody else's. I took a safety pin and always had that t-shirt up high. And as the good Army officer or non-commissioned officer I'm expecting, Captain, Major? Well, so were the guys that trained us, of course. But my experience in the Marines, I was blessed. I was in from 72 to 75. It was right after the Vietnam War was over. And for the older people in the room, the only excitement I had was live firing in Quantico, Virginia. And I spent 1 year overseas in Okinawa as a logistics officer and was discharged from the 1st Marine Division out of Camp Pendleton, California in 75, excuse me. This was the last couple of weeks. We settled in about 3,000 Vietnamese refugees at Camp Pendleton, and then I was discharged. 3 years, no combat, no post-traumatic stress. It was just a very, very idyllic opportunity for me to spend 3 years as a Marine lieutenant after I was privileged to serve 4 years at Wake Forest. I say served, I guess that's not the wrong word. It's probably the vocabulary that's inculcated by my incarceration. I didn't serve at Wake Forest. I just got to be a student at Wake Forest. Fast forward, as the introduction indicated, I was blessed to be a member of the House, and I was from a rural setting, Greene County. The leadership of the House and Senate is preeminently from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia because they have the numbers. There are at least half, or approaching half, of the members of the House and Senate are from the greater Philadelphia area and the greater Pittsburgh area by virtue of population. I went on to become Speaker of the House, and if you came to the Capitol today, the portrait still is on the wall. You might not know it, but at the bottom of the portrait, a rabid GOP brigadier decided to embarrass me even further. And not only does it say Bill DeWeese, Speaker of the House, it says this character was locked up for a while. So 100 years from now, when Mr. and Mrs. Jones have Johnny or Jane up there, my name will be at least resonating in a unique fashion. But I had a wonderful opportunity to be involved in a variety of things relative to our legislative agenda, whether it was the children's health care legislation or the naming of, not the naming, but the building of these big stadiums around the state. And trying to get more money for basic education, trying to get more money for higher education. And I had a good career, 35 years, 11 months, and 14 days before the Attorney General's people put me in handcuffs. It was a pretty stark alteration in my life. And somehow, I remained a pretty happy character. And I guess that's why your president was so generous in saying, come on by tonight and chat, have a conversation with Alexis and all of her friends. That's almost exactly what he said. And this is a conversation, but it's going to go up in the question and answer session, I hope, about mass incarceration of young African American folks and Latino folks, and in the big cities, Asians. And the whole dynamic of my learning experience was fortified by the fact that, unlike the current President of the United States, I had a very, very liberal voting record for 35 years, 11 months, and 14 days. And when I was put in handcuffs and got inside, my reputation on the outside made it very, very plausible for me to have a safe and eventually a very substantial learning experience. So I want to talk to you about 5 quick things, and one of them is living with your neighbors. And as you can see, I had the American dream. I had it made. I had a very, very good career that I had pounded out on my own and worked my way up through the big numbers in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, even though I was a rural legislator, the last rural legislator from the Democratic side of the aisle to be the Speaker of the House. And then all of a sudden, I'm shoved into an 8x12 hut, an 8x12 cage. And the guy in there had about 6 teeth. He had a urine bag strapped to his leg. He had diabetes, and he'd recently had open heart surgery. If you're a Caucasian character in a correctional setting, and you're over the age of 40, chances are you're a child molester. I was blessed by the fact that I had a lot of publicity on my way to the Slammer and the radio and TV up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, not necessarily New York City or Los Angeles, but the Wilkes-Barre radio said, former State House Speaker getting locked up tomorrow. So when I got in, a couple of these kids come down, and if you're 64, these youngsters are 24 or 18, 32, average age probably in the early middle 30s. He said, you be Mr. Bill? You be the crooked congressman? I said, yeah, that's me. Obviously, the alternative was a lot more sinister. My reception would have been a lot more austere. But I made up my mind the day that I arrived. I was going to figure this thing out, and that I was going to make something of it and come out a better person. And as I said in my farewell speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, right before I went to prison, I'm not as humble as I need to be, but I'm a lot more humble than I used to be. And at the end of that reception, as I was being whisked off a few days later, I was given a very warm response by the people that I'd served with for over 3.5 decades. So my roommate, or I guess that would be a collegiate term, my cellmate, his name was Ron. And to make matters even more doubtful, among the young men in that setting, 1,200 men in the setting. back to mass incarceration. 800 African American, 100 Puerto Rican, 300 white. Half the white were child molesters. I never saw, and I was there for 23 months, I never saw another white-collar character. Not one. Everything else, 200 guys doing life. And in the rap song, which I will not sing, the last line was guys doing life were my best friends, and that's pretty much where this rap ends. Ain't got no quarrel with the DOC. My frickin' bitches with the OAG. Department of Corrections, of course, Office of Attorney General. But when I got locked up that day, and I looked at Ron with 6 teeth, a urine bag, diabetes, scars, gets worse. He was doing his second bid, 7 to 14, for child molestation. His own family turned him in. He got no letters, got no phone calls, got no visitors, got nothing except a couple mice in our cell. Now I still had some resources, so I had a plastic footlocker. The mice couldn't get in. So my pretzels were safe. Those little critters, about 4 o'clock in the morning, were munching on his because he had a cardboard box. So I surreptitiously write a letter to my lady friend, and I said, send Ron 25 bucks. I want him to get a $24 footlocker made out of plastic so those frickin' mice don't keep me awake at night. Well, guess what? A couple weeks later, he's got the money. A couple weeks later, he's got the footlocker. A couple weeks later, she makes an egregious mistake by telling me on the telephone, did Ron get the money I sent him? I avoided the subject and talked about something else. The next morning, burly guard shows up and through that wire mesh window in a big steel door, part of the rap song coming back, but I'm not going to go all the way, comes a disciplinary notice. Hey, wise guy, you're in trouble. You're not allowed to send money through your family to other inmates. Here I think I'm being, anybody take Greek? I'm being eleemosynary. That's a good vocabulary word, eleemosynary. I think I'm being, Mahatma Gandhi was eleemosynary. I'm being a warm-hearted, nice guy, liberal Democrat, Bill DeWeese, taking care of Ron with 6 teeth, a fist bag, diabetes. I'm trying to take care of this character, even though the people on my cell block, 102 guys on my cell block, 20 or so murderers, carjackers, arsonists, drug dealers, becoming my best friends, I might add, and certainly my workout partners, because I still had that from the Marine Corps ethos. This guy had it made. Now he had a new footlocker. They weren't going to take his footlocker, but they dragged my sorry tail down to the disciplinary hearing and said, do you know why you cannot do what you did? And I said, no, because some drug dealer in Erie or Scranton or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or Greene County or wherever, he's going to say to his person on the block, if you don't send your family, my family, money, I'm going to put a shiv right in your throat. And the gang membership, the Bloods, Crips, and Latin Kings, the FOI, the Fruit of Islam, and to some melancholy revelation, the Aryan Brotherhood, who were not very plentiful and therefore not very active, but they were still there. The gangs would use this kind of mechanism. So, to make a long story abbreviated, I was given 2 weeks of modest punishment, but it went on my record that I had a write-up. Well, that was the only write-up I got, but I started to get a feel for the penitentiary. I started to live with my neighbors. Now, the only way to live with your neighbors is to learn their story. Anybody have any guess as to what I learned about Ron, who's approaching the age of 80? Second bid, 7 to 14. He's out for a few years. Boom, right back in. he was molested by his stepfather 70 years earlier. It's hard not to have some tincture of empathy once you learn your neighbor's story. And I was learning his story. Now, most of the rough and tumble characters on the block and in the yard and in the gym said, "Senator," was one of my other nicknames, although I was never a senator. I was only a member of the House. "Senator, why don't you get out there? You don't want to be with that child molester, blah, 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 blah." I said, well, somebody's got to be with him, and I'm going to treat him appropriately. But when he'd go to the yard, people would call him names. Of course, they were calling other people names. It was a very, very different environment than what I'd been used to at 320 Sherman Avenue, or under the old magnolia trees at Wake Forest University, in the heart of the Piedmont of North Carolina, or even on leave in Australia or Japan or Germany. I had it made, and all of a sudden I'm in a 8 by 12. My little hut was 12 by 8, a crapper, a bunk in a cardboard crate. I just wish someday, and someday I will, go through the whole thing. I'm pulling out the more wholesome aspects. But I got to learn about my neighbor. I learned his story. And 2 or 3 other quick stories. Alberto, who was one of the dominant gentlemen in the Latin Kings and one of my best friends, he had shoulders like this. And on his back, he had a tattoo this big of Jesus Christ. And out of one shoulder blade was the Puerto Rican flag. And out of the other shoulder blade was the American flag. And Alberto was happy and popular, but he was doing 20 to 40. And you don't ask people what they're doing. They're either going to tell you or you're going to learn it just by walking the yard. But we got to be close, and when my late mom used to come visit in her 90s, coming to visit her boy, well, Alberto's family came up from Philly a couple times, and we just mixed it up and got to know each other back on the block. And by the way, this guy would stand on his hands like this and then do his push-ups. He was a phenomenal athlete. I said, Alberto, 20 to 40, and he was about 17 in, and he behaved himself. So he was going to go home, 20. I said, what'd you do? He said, Mr. Bill, I kills the drug dealer who came to kill me. So there was at least some element of self-defense or mitigating circumstances. He wasn't doing life. But what I'm telling you, I was not at the county jail. And I was not at Club Fed, where most white-collar characters are lodged for political dynamics or income tax evasion. But I got to know Alberto's story, and therefore got to feel a great affinity for him. Amir. Amir was the premier person on the block, because I was privileged to live on the same block, 6 blocks, 200 men apiece, 1,200 men. But he was also the premier Muslim in the facility. And the American prison world is heavily habituated by young men who have embraced that faith and that culture. And his own personal behavior and sense of rectitude was pristine. He did not smoke, he did not cuss, he prayed to Mecca 5 times a day. He was a bodybuilder in his late 40s, but he would be intimidating to even men in their golden youth who looked like they could go up against Randall L. back in the day. I'm exposing my age on that one. But these kids, and if you're in your 60s, all these young fellas with 6-packs and dreadlocks and musculature that was out of magazines, these kids would never bump up against Amir. Very quiet, walk the yard alone. Once in a while, a couple of his Muslim friends would be with him. he kept a wary eye on the old politician, and after about 6 months, he said, let's walk the yard. I felt like I was walking the yard with a star. It's incredible. But we became best friends. And 3 nights ago, on my way to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in my old Dodge pickup truck, because I can't afford a new one because they took my frickin' pension, the phone rings and it's Amir. It's Amir doing life. And he's trying to get me on his visiting list. Well, due to the administrative gymnastics the Department of Correction injects into everyone's world, the warden said, no, DeWeese is already on a visiting list up in Wilkes-Barre at the jail that he was at. We're not going to put you on. Well, I'm working it. But the bottom line is, I got a lifetime friend. I'll write a letter to every governor. I'll go see every governor, and I'm blessed to have served with 8 before I served in the penitentiary. But even most recently, I have a very good cordial relationship since I lobby for labor unions, boilermakers, coal miners, bricklayers, school teachers, nurses, cops. I have a great relationship with the current governor. And somehow, some way, the individuals that I got to know in prison, especially about a half-a-dozen guys doing life, they're always going to get that letter once a year to the Board of Pardons asking for commutation. You get to know your neighbors, and you get to respect your neighbors. You get to hear their story. And Amir and 4 or 5 tough drug dealers in Philadelphia 25 years ago in a bar, nightclub, blood's on one side, Crips on the other, guns come out. 2 guys go to heaven, 3 go to the hospital, and 3 get life in the penitentiary. Amir's one of them. They're kids, virtually, early 20s. Now, I'm not saying they don't deserve stiff punishment. But I just told you, my mom died months ago. She was at the Masonic Village over in Stewickton. I would have trusted Amir to take care of my mom 24/7, forever. That's how I would have trusted him if he worked in the recreation facility, he worked in the food service facility, he worked in the security facility, whatever. That's the kind of people you meet. There are a lot of good people that made a terrible, terrible mistake in the penitentiary. But if you learn your neighbor's story, it's certainly a lot better to go through life knowing their story. The third point I wanted to make is I live in constant gratitude. I always lived to some degree in gratitude. But 23 months in a state penitentiary, an 8x12 cell, where you're the only white-collar character in there, and everybody's pretty nice to you. The guards, there were a couple guards that gave me a lot of crap. There's that crooked politician, blah, 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 blah. But the inmates, the convicts. In fact, I learned the difference between those 2 terms when I first got there. Talked to one of the young kids from Philly. I said, Jerome, I'm going to do my best to be a good inmate. He said, inmate? You ain't no friggin' inmate. You're a convict. You got convicted, didn't you? I said, yeah, I guess I did. But going from the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, the presidential suite, where Bill and Hillary, I have no idea what kind of bliss or lack of bliss existed at that setting, but I got to go one night, and there was no rooms available, and they put me in the presidential suite. So I'm at the presidential suite years ago, and now I'm in Camp Hill Prison, walking in the door. Big burly sergeant said, I saw you on TV last night, DeWeese, because they filmed me walking in. I said, the scrum of reporters there, they said, anything to say for yourself, Mr. DeWeese? I said, yeah, 3 things, 30 seconds. I'm going to comport with the protocols of the institution. I'm going to get in tip-top shape. And I'm going to make new friends. And this big, burly son of a gun, I'm cleaning up my language, said in front of about 25 of us naked guys. Now, I was completely naked because I didn't have any tattoos. We're getting deloused. We're in the shower, and it's not water coming down. It's delousing fluid. It's a long way from the presidential suite, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. He said, you ain't going to make no frickin' friends in this place. Well, guess what? That big sergeant was wrong. I made a lot of friends. The constant gratitude. You got to live in constant gratitude. Guess how many salads I got every month? 1. And they stuffed it into a coffee cup. A coffee cup. Everything else was boiled. Worst thing about prison was the food. Period. End of story. Best thing about prison was working out with guys that had been working out for years and years and years and knew every technique. And on a bench press, knew exactly how far to go down. On a fly, knew how far to go down. They taught me a lot. And so far, so good. But I just am trying to give you a little bit of an idea of constant gratitude. Once a week, we got clean sheets. Oh, I mean clean sheets. Looking out a window. We had a window, probably 6 feet by 6 inches. And you go out and look out that window, and guess what I saw? I saw dandelions. I saw fishing worms. I saw robins. I saw spiders. Nobody in jail will step on a spider. Nobody in jail will step on anything. Because they know what it's like to be crushed. They know what it's like to be ensnared. And living in constant gratitude, obviously it's easier for somebody that's been locked up to think about it. But for the rest of my days, that guy is going to live in constant gratitude. Parenthetically, on the day that was taken, the guy said, I've been taking pictures for 23 years, DeWeese. You're the only so-and-so that ever smiled. I said, well, I'm going to keep on smiling. 2 other things that you reach out for. On a cold winter morning, 35 degrees, blue skies, outdoor weight pit, gentle breeze, 2 hours working out with the Bloods or the Crips or the Latin Kings, with the Aryan Brotherhood sequestered over by themselves. 100 people, 200 people, the other 700 or 800 people walk in the yard. Little things in prison and in life mean a lot. And my feeling was, I'm going to go through this and make the best of it. Number four, tell you that it's best to keep short accounts. It's best to try to forget things. A lot of money is spent on counseling because people can't forget the way they were treated by somebody, the way somebody lied to them, the way a boss or a priest or a lover, somebody maltreated you. I'm here tonight, and I know that all of us have had a tough time here or there, or a parent that's had a tough time here or there. You're either in a crisis of some kind, or you were, or you're going to be. And if you learn to forget the bad things, and I learned to forget the fact that the guy, the 80-year-old man I was with, was a child molester. I learned to forget and forgive. I ran into Tom Corbett. He's the former governor, former attorney general, who put me in handcuffs. I ran into him about 6 months after I got out of jail at the Hilton Hotel in Harrisburg. We were going to the same birthday party. I'm on the mezzanine floor. We're going up. I just get ready to get into the elevator. Who's there? The guy that put me in jail. And his wife. Evening, Governor. Evening, Bill. I said, you know, 10 years from now, maybe we can have dinner. I used to know the guy. We used to have dinner. I was very involved in PNC Park and Heinz Field. And he was the Attorney General at the time, before he became governor. So I knew this character, and he knew this character. He said, DeWeese, you look great. I had a black turtleneck on and slacks, and that was it. I had a sport coat over my hand. He said, and he said, you look great. And I said, well, what the hell? You would too if you got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and worked out with 25 kids every day for 2 years. But the fact is, I did say to him, 10 years from now, let's go have dinner. I didn't say 2 years or 3 years, but I said 10 years, let's go let's go have dinner. The reason I'm here tonight is because your president and your professoriate have given me the opportunity to come by here for about 36 minutes and share some observations and to tell you what it's like for me to live with a neighbor that you can't unfriend a neighbor if you're in the penitentiary. You know that? You cannot unfriend them. You're there. But if you learn your story, their story, you have empathy. If you can learn to forget, you're going to have a better life. And I would love to talk to you about mass incarceration. I would love to talk to you about the incarceration in general. But I wanted to at least give you a little taste of what I went through. And I'm not as religious as I wish I were, but for some reason, I'm a very happy guy. And I will do my best to stay in touch with about a half a dozen or more of the men that I was locked up with, especially the guys doing life. I'm involved with all of their 6 families, send them a little bit of money and keep in touch, trying to get on the visiting list, the call list. And I'm reaching out, and I'm trying to go around the state. I spoke at Villanova, spoke at Temple twice, spoke at Penn State Harrisburg, spoke at Duquesne Law School, spoke at W&J. Very, very honored to be here. And I would appreciate any kind of observations or questions that you might have about the world of the big house or the world of the state house. Thanks very much. Questions? Come on. 23 months upstate, first bid. Only bid, I hope. Alexa.
Okay, so I was just wondering how the party did you any differently after you got out versus like before?
How did the party?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party? May I tell you a little story? Senator Fumo. Remember Senator Fumo from Philadelphia? A premier guy. Recently got in some trouble. 25 years ago, Alexa, this powerful state senator went up to Allenwood Federal Penitentiary to visit his uncle, who had been a member of the state senate. And they wouldn't let him in because he didn't have the right paperwork. When he adjusted his tie, this guy was trying to go in and visit his uncle. He's a member of the Pennsylvania Senate. And he said to the guard around quitting time, he said, "You don't know who I am. I'm a state senator." The guard says, "We got a lot of state senators in here." So the Democratic Party, well, this was a bipartisan dynamic. They took 26 of us out of their handcuffs. Most everybody pled or snitched. I did neither. And how'd that work out for you, Bill DeWeese? But I am under appeal, and that will be adjudicated probably between now and Christmas. You always hear, not always, but sometimes you hear about a DNA case where somebody's been locked up for 15 years for murder, and this guy didn't do it, this person did, and walks out. In a white-collar case, that very seldom happens, but there's a chance that I would be adjudicated favorably between now and the end of the year. But the answer to your question is I was well received by one group for sure, and that would have been the labor unions. And I will also say that the military veterans, the Marines, and I was very fortunate. So the fact is I have a job. The fact that we're not educating these youngsters when they're in prison. The prison that I was at, they closed 4 schools within about a 30-month period. Before I got there, while I was there, and after I was there. They closed the body shop. They closed the culinary school for food service. They closed the greenhouse, and they closed the music school. So these youngsters that are going 2 to 4 on a drug charge, 4 to 8 on a burglary charge, they can't really get traction and start over again because they're not getting trained. It's almost a warehouse instead of a Department of Corrections. But the specific answer, Alexis, is that I was treated very well when I got out. And I know the Secretary of Corrections, and I'm trying to do all I can, obviously for free, pro bono, go all over the state and talk. And I'm very, very involved in the families of the incarcerated. Because, as one lifer told me, "Bill, when you're doing life, after 5 or 10 years, even mama forgets you're here. So, we have more people incarcerated in the United States than any country in the world. 75% of those youngsters do not have a high school education or a GED. 75 to 80% of those youngsters have a drug or alcohol problem. And about 68% of those kids are going to go right back in. They're going to recidivate. So I'm going to do everything I can the rest of my life, pro bono, to at least talk to people, encourage people to stay in touch, because I think there are 70 million Americans out of the 330 million Americans that have some kind of a record. Mine's a little bit more extravagant. But by the way, I'm the only character that went to jail for allegedly campaigning in the Capitol building with staff. Theft of services. But since Mary Jones on my staff got her paycheck that month, not only did I get theft of services, but I got theft by unlawful taking because she took the check. And then I get theft by deception because Mary Jones did not go to the state treasury and say, I'm a thief. And then I got a conspiracy charge because I talked to Mary Jones. And then I got an ethics violation because the other stuff is inherently a violation of the state ethics code. So say this young guy and I, we get in a fight out in the parking lot. No. anyway, there's an aggravating assault charge. There's a general assault charge. I got a Swiss Army knife. I don't, but it's carrying a concealed weapon. I'm Jewish, and he calls me a bad name. It's a terroristic threat. I mean, the prosecutors in this country have every advantage. The defense has very, very few. But I live in constant gratitude. More questions? Yes?
What do you think a potential solution could be to the problems you've seen in the prison industry?
The question was some potential answers to some of these questions. And the number one thing is education. Number two is making sure these people, like me, are able to be in contact with their families. And I think those are two. And then we got to train them. I mean, education, I'm talking about first grade or pre-kindergarten. I'm talking about, if we get to youngsters, and some of you are going to be teachers at some level, if we get the youngsters 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we got a good chance. Obviously, it's way over my knowledge, but trying to rebuild the American family structure would be a help. But if we can educate these youngsters, we're going to try to keep them out of those facilities. But those 4 things that were closed down in my big penitentiary, if those kids went and got a mowing machine and learned about things in the greenhouse, they could go out to Sewickley or Fox Chapel, Upper St. Clair. They could buy an old pickup truck, get a lawnmower, 2 or 3 of their buddies, boom, boom, boom. A few years they could have a little business. The culinary, that's one great field for those of us who are locked up and get out. I'm too old at this juncture. But to cook, I mean, I can learn to cook, but not professionally. But they don't ask, they being the businesses, the bars and restaurants, especially in Harrisburg, I mean, where I work a lot. A lot of those men and women have had experiences with the DOC. But education, education, education. We're warehousing. It should be the DOW, Department of Warehousing. We're not correcting anybody. Mandatory sentencing. Mandatory sentencing. If this young lady and this young lady get locked into a drug charge and it's automatic 4 to 8, but the judge would think, well, she's got a really good chance of improving, and I'm going to only give her 1 to 2. He can't, because it's 4 to 8. It's 4 to 8. The inflexibility of the system. And again, the prosecutorial muscularity is redoubtable, and the defense is meek. We have very few opportunities. I wouldn't even be able to appeal, except I'm blessed to have a job. You can't believe how much of my paycheck goes to the lawyers. And so be it. I'm not mad. I've got good lawyers. And if you don't plead guilty, you got a shot. But it's daunting. But anyway, education, education, education. Yes?
What get into like politics in the first place?
I came back from Okinawa to California and was being discharged, and the state representative died in office, so there was an empty seat. There was a special election. You've all seen about the special election recently. I went through a special election in April of 1976, and there was no incumbent, and I was just getting out of the service, and I was thinking about being a police officer. I interviewed with the Los Angeles Police. I didn't interview, I went to the academy. I did interview with the Secret Service and the Central Intelligence Agency, along with many Marine lieutenants. So I was thinking about a career in that setting, and all of a sudden there was an opening in the legislature, and I had $1,000 saved up. My dad had $1,000, and I raised $5,000. What did these characters, and I know both of the characters, and I'm a character, so I can say that. I know Saccone and Lamb very well. But what, $15 million combined or more? That's a congressional seat. I was not a congressman, I was a state rep. But I only spent $5,000 the first time to get elected. But I loved politics, I loved history, and there was an open seat. Those would be 3 reasons that I ran. Plus, I love the theatricality of mixing it up and going after the issues. And I was very, very liberal, and for a rural legislator, that was unique, and I got a big kick out of that, too. Yes?
With the U.S. having one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, do you think more alternative sentences would help?
Great question. Would more alternative sentences help? Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. The recommended sentencing guideline for this maniac was 9 months probation. That judge threw the book at me. 2.5 to 5? Because Mary Jones was campaigning on government hours instead of doing government work. She was doing vote for bill, vote for bill. Allegedly. But there are innumerable ways to take care of these things rather than put people behind 7 rows of razor wire. That's an excellent question, and that will be part of my next talk. Yes, thank you. How much time do you have, Professor? Still 5 or 8 minutes? Yes. Oh, my appeal. What is my appeal based upon? I had 8 witnesses. The government had 8 witnesses. They said I was a bad guy. Others said I was a good guy. But I had 35 in the next room, and the judge said, we've had enough. 8 plus 8. The others are going to say the same thing. It's cumulative. So my case is in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court right now, and it would be an interesting case study for anybody to look at if they had a class where that was possible term paper or whatever. But it's the definition of cumulative witnesses. That's why it made its way to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. Because most trial attorneys and most trial judges say you never limit a fact witness. You can limit a character witness. You can have 25 people say that Robert Morris is a nice person, and you can only bring in so many of the neighbors or grandma's best friends or the priest or the Little League coach or whatever. You can limit you can limit character witnesses, but where our contention is that you cannot limit fact witnesses. So that's the essence of my appeal. So you guys are criminal justice and political science. Any observations on the recent Congressional imbroglio? This was a real unique opportunity for Western Pennsylvania. I mean, we were all over the world, front pages. By the way, to show you how old I am, Connor Lamb's grandfather was majority leader of the Pennsylvania Senate as a Democrat. And when he retired from that job, he became the Secretary of Legislative Affairs under Governor Casey in the early 1990s when I was Speaker of the House. So when I got out of jail, Connor Lamb's mom and dad took me to the Hilton Garden Inn, bought me a filet mignon. So I know that young fellow very well, and I also served in the legislature with Mr. Saccone, and although I don't agree with his political perspective, he's a nice person. So it was a very, very well-run effort on Connor's part, of course, and it was staying out of the Trumpian world as much as he could. It was probably very, very perspicacious on his part, and added to his political success. Yes?
How have you enjoyed lobbying recently?
How do I enjoy lobbying? I like it a lot, except I have to be more reserved, more retiring. It's a little more effort because I have no staff. It's just Wild Bill. I don't have anybody else. And, you know, sometimes politicians say, "Do you expect me to read that thing? That big, thick bill?" Well, if you're going to go and argue in front of a House member or a Senate member, you better know what's going on. So it's not daunting, but it's different. And I enjoy it a lot. But I enjoy visiting the penitentiaries. And if I had my dream come true, I'd be Deputy Secretary. I don't think I'm capable of being Secretary. I'd love to be Deputy Secretary of Corrections under some future government. Because I think I've been behind bars. And I think I have an empathetic perspective. And very few people will have served in the big house and the state house at very aggressive levels. Although I didn't serve at an aggressive level, but I was in an aggressive seat. Of all the politicians they locked up, remember I told you they come after 26 of us? Well, they locked up 6 of us. Other 5 got minimum security. But I was too verbal. So I got medium. But medium was best for a learning experience because the men that were there, many of them were lifers, and they'd already been in rough settings, but they'd behaved themselves, and they were in the groove, and they were workout monsters, and I just was blessed to be in a setting as an older person where I could take really good care of myself, wrote lots of letters. I have a journal, and I don't know whether it'll ever be published. I don't know whether it's worthy of being published, but it's quite graphic. I mean, not that graphic, but the graphic about my experiences. Yes?
Did you have a moment of desperation? I mean, even visiting prison as a police officer or as a federal agent, I get anxious walking in that environment. I can't imagine that first night of realizing you have 12 to 24 months.
No. I had 2.5 to 5. I had 30 to 60. But it's a great question, Professor, because I would be a liar to say I wasn't a little apprehensive. But when that big steel door slammed shut, and then they cuff you. Allegedly campaigning in the freaking Capitol building. I'm locked up shackled at the ankle, shackled here, and they take me to the holding block. And then they take me to the cell block. Some young fella up there on the 3rd floor sees an old white guy, and he says, hey, we got another child molester. And I used some of my Marine Corps profanity, and I told him what he could do. I was hoping he could never get out and get me, but I knew I was getting transferred pretty soon. But I said, I'm a politician. I won't say what else I said. But they offered me administrative custody, which is obviously you're locked up by yourself, and I wanted to be with the troops. But no, I went through a divorce in 1999. That was worse than prison. I'm not kidding. Since you're an Army person, having been to boot camp, I don't care which branch, the noise, the discipline, I don't recommend anybody go to the military as a prerequisite for going to prison. But if you have to go, it certainly did help. Anyway, I think it's time for me to cease. Thank you so much for your attention. You've been wonderful.